Jeremy, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing well, man.
I'm excited to be here.
Me too.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Yep.
You know, we all know what it's like to be hurt, to be offended, to be attacked, and we all know what it's like to be told to then forgive. So let me ask you a question. When we are really hurt and we know we should forgive, how do we forgive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the clearest signs to me that the Bible speaks of forgiveness is the idea that when I have forgiven somebody, then I have let go of the desire and the plan to get revenge. Mm-hmm. Simply put.
Yeah.
You know, it's common as human beings to desire to get back at people. We get angry, we get frustrated. We're like, we want to repay. We want to give back to them how they hurt us. But the Bible is clear that God, his desire is that he would be the one that brings vengeance or repays and brings justice to any situation. And so, you know, when we were talking about what we were going to share about over these last few Bible studies, you know, I thought about doing a different one on the story of the Exodus. But when I got to it this week, I just felt like this was a topic that has popped up here recently in the last few weeks. And I just thought it was something we could talk about.
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear any thoughts on forgiveness from your point of view, any stories you may have. But for me, I want to share a story in a moment, but I want to reiterate, how do we forgive? How do we forgive? How do I forgive somebody? And then how do I know I have forgiven that person? How do I know I have forgiven someone or a situation or a boss or a spouse or a friend, somebody in my life, a church member? How do I know that I have forgiven that person? And I think one of the clearest signs, and I want to talk about as we go on, I want to talk about separating the actual act of forgiving versus the emotions that you feel after you've been hurt. Mm-hmm. And I want to make a clear distinction between those two things.
Yeah.
But tonight as we talk, I just want to answer this question. How do we forgive? And how do we know that we have forgiven somebody? Because we talk about ruling all the time. God has created human beings to rule in the earth with him in cooperation and collaboration with God, such that the earth would reflect the rule of heaven, so that heaven and earth would be aligned. And I can't think of a more clear, we've talked about this quite often. Yeah. I can't think of a more clear way to show the alignment of heaven and earth than when human beings forgive.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus says it in Matthew 5. He says it again in Matthew 6, repeats it in Matthew 6 multiple times in his teaching of the disciples to pray. When you forgive, forgive like this. And then he goes, okay, hey, by the way, when you forgive, because this is a regular part of your life as a human being. So I think understanding how do we forgive, and then how do we know we have forgiven when we've acted it out? How do we know? And I want to talk about that tonight. I'm going to tell a story really quickly. Years ago, I was hired on at a company. And before I got hired on, I somehow stumbled across an email, and I'd been connected to the company for a long time, and I was going to be hired on a staff. And I stumbled upon an email of the head of the company, and this is a true story. And this person had very disparaging things to say about me that I had no idea this person held this perspective of me. And it was painful. It was painful. We were in contract talks and negotiations and got hired on like the next week. Wow. So now I'm in a dilemma. Now I'm in a situation where I go, I know that the head of this organization, how they feel about me, and they just hired me on as a relatively important part of their team. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to harbor unforgiveness. I don't want to harbor resentment and bitterness. I don't want to harbor any of those things. I want to honor this person because I knew God had called me there. And so I wanted to answer the call to that. At the same time, these were real words about a real human being, and they were painful. And so I prayed and I said, Lord, how do I forgive? How do I work with and for somebody who feels this way about me? They never knew that I saw that. They never knew, to this day they don't know, that I saw these words. And they never will. because I had to do, well, one of two things. Number one, I had to secure my identity in who I was in God. And I had to make sure that I knew why I was there for the right reason.
Yeah.
It wasn't to please this person. It was to please and honor the Lord, because the Lord had called me there. And I knew he had. I knew it was a yes. And I knew it was without question I was supposed to be there. So then it was, okay, well, what do I do with this? Because I can't live in offense, right? Jesus talks about that. Woe to those who, offense will come.
Yeah.
It will come. The question is, what do we do with it? And there's a great pastor out in Las Vegas who wrote a book called Unoffendable. And the whole point of the book is, how do we live unoffendable as Christians? How do we live unoffendable as a follower of Jesus? And so I decided in my heart, I was like, you know what? I want to forgive, but how do I know I have forgiven? And I started reading in the scriptures, and I came across a story in Genesis. And it's a really important story. And this story in Genesis chapter 4 actually connects to the Gospel of Matthew. In Matthew, some of the disciples of Jesus are asking him the same question in Matthew 18. And he quotes this story in Genesis 4. But I want to start with this. Forgiveness begins with God. God is the ultimate one who forgives, right?
Yes.
And because he's the ultimate one who forgives, we have been called to be conformed to his image and to reflect his character in the world. Then in that moment that I had a choice either to live bitterly and think about this, I'm on staff. I mean, if there's ever an opportunity to get back at somebody, that you take this.
Yeah.
You, like this position, I'm like, I could do this. I could get revenge in a nasty way. But my heart was, I want to honor you. I want to serve these people. And I want to honor my leadership. And I love these people. I love this person. And I want to honor them. So what do I do? And so I prayed, and God said, let it go. Let everything go, all the resentment, any bitterness, and any plan or desire for revenge. To make this person look bad, to make them feel pain. I want you to honor them and serve them. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And it was tough. And I imagine somebody's out there thinking or listening right now, going, there's somebody in my world that I know I want to forgive. Or maybe you don't want to forgive them.
Right.
Maybe it's too painful.
Yeah.
And you go, how do I do this? How do I actually forgive and let it go? Which is the Greek word, actually, in Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 18, which we'll read in a moment. The word for forgive is literally to let go. The question is to let go of what? To let go of the plan, not just the desire, because sometimes those emotions come up and the enemy tries to tempt us into vengeance and revenge. I'm going to get this person back. I'm going to make them feel this pain. I'm going to do something to make them look stupid. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get back.
Yeah, you know how it is. It's like, well, if they say this, then I'm going to say this back.
Exactly.
And then if they say this, well, I'm going to respond. And we almost have like, we create an argument. We kind of preview an argument with the other person in our mind. And then, but the idea is that we win the argument at the end.
Yeah, we've got all of our lines.
We got the strategy
memorized. I'm going to say this. I'm going to make you look bad. It is to embarrass the person.
Mm-hmm. Or to make them feel the pain that we feel.
Yeah.
That's it. It's when it's the pain that you're feeling, you want to inflict that same pain on them, maybe even times 10.
Yeah.
And that's the way oftentimes the world works.
Yeah.
Is if you've been hurt, well, then you hurt the other person back. In fact, hurt them so bad that they never think about hurting you again. That's a lot of where I think unforgiveness comes from, or wanting to fight back is we're so hurt that we want to shut it down, and we almost just try and destroy them and say, don't ever mess with me again. Hopefully this taught you a lesson to not mess with me, because I don't ever want to feel that pain again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make you feel the pain so that you don't hurt me again.
I think that word destroy that you just used is really powerful. I think we may not verbalize it that way, but sometimes in our heart, that's what we're feeling.
It really is.
I want to destroy this person.
Yeah.
I want to hurt them.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're getting raw tonight.
Raw. Yeah, you know, that's really true, because I think sometimes it grows to not just making them feel the hurt, but to utterly destroy them so that they can never do that to you again.
Yeah. I think about friends that have been hurt. I think about people that have been stabbed in the back. I think about our own pastor his name has been dragged through the mud online. I mean, all kinds, just lies. And you go, God, what are we doing? And it brings me back to Exodus 34. If you have your Bible, if you want to open it up to Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7, it brings me back to this, that God is the source of forgiveness. He is the source of all life and all abundance and all restoration and healing. So of course he's the God of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that's at the center of the gospel, is forgiveness and to set things right. But in Exodus 34, 6 and 7, it says, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, that's thousands of generations, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. God's desire is forgiveness and mercy and restoration and healing and compassion. God's desire is that he would set right us in our bad moments, in our sin, in our mistakes, in our unforgiveness, that his heart is to draw us close to his heart to say, this is the way of life. This is the way of life. If there's nothing else, forgiveness is the way to life and freedom. It is the way to life and freedom. It was the way that God brought life and freedom to me, was through forgiveness. This is Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them. But not only that, it's life and freedom for my soul when I extend that same forgiveness to somebody else. And it starts with God. And then it continues with Jesus. Jesus taught that forgiveness is essential. It is essential for us. It's not optional for the followers of Jesus. It was a command. Forgive one another. He's not saying, if it's not a suggestion.
Right.
He's like, if you feel like forgiving, go ahead and do it.
And it's not, yes, we should forgive, but if you're really, really, really hurt, then you don't have to.
Then hurt somebody.
It's kind of, many years ago, I remember talking to somebody, and he was sharing his story of basically the terrible things that his father did to him when he was a child, and they were really bad. But I remember what he said to me. He said, Eric, I hate that man for what he did to me. I will never forgive him, and God understands. And I thought to myself, God understands your pain.
Yes.
But even in all that hate you have for your father, God is not agreeing with you saying, yes, you should hate him.
Yeah.
And I hate him too. Let's hate him together. Jesus isn't saying that. God isn't saying that. If anything, God is saying, I know it hurts, but you're not going to be able to heal by hurting them back.
Yeah.
Healing doesn't, we almost mistakenly think that if we can hurt them more than they hurt us, that somehow heals us. If I can destroy them, that somehow brings healing to me. There's no healing in that. And that's the whole point of forgiveness, is you almost get yourself off of the hook and you can actually move into a place of healing. And of course, it's a process. If you've had something seriously happen to you, I'm going to be honest, you're probably not going to be able to forgive them overnight.
No.
And there's going to be moments where you feel like, okay, I think I forgave them, and something's going to trigger though.
Yeah.
At some point, and you're going to feel that anger come rushing back into your mind, and you're going to be tempted to think, well, maybe I didn't forgive him. Maybe I can't forgive him. Maybe God doesn't want me to forgive him. But really, it's just a process of allowing God to heal us and basically setting our minds to say, by God's grace, I have and I will continue to forgive this person.
Yes.
And allowing God to work through you bit by bit. And I think a lot of what that is not beating yourself up when you find yourself having an anger flare up again.
Yes.
Don't beat yourself up and feel like a failure when you at first thought you forgave and now you're beginning to question it. The devil's going to throw thoughts in your mind.
Yeah.
The devil's going to do whatever he can do to trigger. You need to just stop that and say, no, devil. In the name of Jesus, I forgive that person, and by God's grace, I can.
Yeah.
And by his stripes, I'm healed of this pain.
And I think to your point right there is what I wanted to distinguish between the act of forgiveness and the feeling of healing.
That's good, yeah.
The act of forgiveness and the feeling of healing. Because a lot of times we go, but I've already forgiven this person. Why am I angry again? Because the healing journey is not linear. It's not just one straight line from hurt to healing. It's a mountain. You're going around it. You're going around it. And the enemy's trying to bring it back up to your attention. Other people say stuff and it triggers you. And I mean, emotions are raw sometimes for years. But the question is, have we pre-decided that we will not seek vengeance?
Yeah.
Have we pre-decided that I have no desire or plan to get revenge? This is the place of forgiveness. This is what Peter actually brings up in Matthew chapter 18 to Jesus. Peter says this in verses 21 and 22, if you are taking notes or if you want to open your Bible to Matthew chapter 18. This is where the essential nature of forgiveness comes in. This is, as you said, this is a reflection of who God is. This is his very image. And this is a big part of how we rule with God in the earth. We talked about it in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What does it look like practically to rule with God? If we are co-heirs with Christ.
Yeah, Romans 8:17.
Yeah. And we are ruling with him in the earth. How do we rule? Well, forgiveness is a central part of what we do.
For the Apostle Paul, it is central.
Yeah. And so in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, Peter asks this. He says, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister in Christ, fellow follower of Christ, who sins against me? Or blood brother or sister, either one.
Either one, yeah.
How many times should I forgive them? Up to 7 times, which is the number of completion. Jesus said, not 7 times, but 77 times. Some translations say 70 times 7, which is in Jewish literature, Hebrew literature, is an unending number. It's an unending number every time. How many times should I forgive? Why? Because Jesus knows the human condition of you're going to be bombarded with human emotion. You're going to be bombarded with triggers. You're going to be bombarded with memories. You're going to be bombarded with that person's face. And you're going to go, how many times should I forgive this person? And then how do I know that I've forgiven them? It's when the Greek word is let go. When we've let go of the desire and the seeking the plan to get revenge. Here's a story in Genesis chapter 4. This is the story of, it starts with Cain, who is Adam and Eve's son. Cain kills his brother Abel, and then he's scared for his life. And this is that story. And then it plays into a distant relative, long past Cain's life, who faces the same thing. And this is where Jesus actually draws from that story in Matthew 18. He's actually pulling from Genesis 4. In verse 13 of Genesis 4, Cain has killed his brother Abel, and he's scared for his life. And this is the interaction he's having with God. In verse 13 of Genesis 4, Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. God said, I'm going to remove you from the land. You can't work the land. You're going to toil. You're going to have trouble. You're going to be a wanderer, a restless wanderer on the earth. And he says, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, removing me, and I'll be hidden from your presence, which is even worse. I'll be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. He's fearing for his life. And in verse 15, the Lord said to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain, which is a Jewish imagery way of saying he protected him, so that no one who found him would kill him. That's verse 15. Verse 16, so Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden, which means exile, away from the garden, away from the land of Eden. In verse 17, Cain knew his wife, made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city and named it after his son Enoch. To Enoch born Irad, to Irad was the father of Mehujael, And Mehujael was the father of Methushael, and Methushael was the father of Lamech. Now here's where the story repeats itself. Lamech married 2 women, his first person to have multiple wives, which God said don't do. One named Adah and the other one Zillah. Adah gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who played stringed instruments and pipes. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Now, verse 23 of Genesis 4. Remember, Cain killed his brother Abel. He was running for his life, and God said, I would protect you. Lamech says to his wives, Adah and Zillah, listen to me, wives of Lamech. Hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, which the response was way worse than the act. Mm-hmm. This guy wounds him, so he kills him. Mm-hmm. And a young man for injuring me. So he kills multiple people for a slight, for wounding him, which is not okay. But the response is way worse. Mm-hmm. And then in verse 24, here's the key. If Cain is avenged 7 times, as God told Cain he would be, Lamech brags that God would protect him 77 times. Wow. He brags about killing somebody who wounded him. He got revenge, he got vengeance, and then he brags about the fact that God will protect him because he got vengeance. Mm. So when Jesus says in Matthew 18, now this is on the tails of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, in verses 21, 22, 23, around in there, where it actually says that anger and hatred in the heart towards another person is as murder.
Right. Yeah, that's what.
Okay. Yep. So we're in the territory of Jesus elevates from the act of murder to the condition in the heart of hatred and wanting vengeance. He's equating them now. He's saying in your heart, it's as if you want them murdered. And so, I know I'm getting intense with this, so this is really important. Matthew 18, Jesus quotes this. He actually says, how many times should you forgive? Jesus is essentially saying, you should do everything opposite of what Lamech did. He got vengeance and revenge for somebody wounding him, multiple people he murdered, for wounding him, for slighting him. And then he brags about it and thinks that God's going to be on his side and protect him, just like your friend. Mm-hmm. Hey, God's on my side. Yeah, I can hate this person and God's on my side.
Yeah, God hates him too, after all, so I can as well.
Right. And so Jesus is using the story from Genesis 4 and Lamech to make a point.
Yeah.
He's saying to the utter assault on the image of God of another human being is taking a life. So what does it mean to forgive them? It means to relinquish that. It means to let go of it, even if they've hurt you. It means to say 70 times 7, 490 times if they offend you. How many times should you forgive? Why? Because in the same way, God has forgiven us. I mean, is there any greater way to reflect his character and nature than God has forgiven human beings who have all failed and sinned and done all kinds of terrible things? And he has forgiven us all equally at the cross and in the resurrection of Jesus and by the blood. He's forgiven us all the same way. And so he's using the story of Lamech to say, God's desire is for us to know how we forgive and then to know when we've actually done it. It is to let go and relinquish the idea of revenge and vengeance. And in fact, God actually goes on to say it in Romans 12, verses 19 through 21. Do not take revenge. Leave room for God's wrath. Overcome evil with good. Do not repay evil for evil. That's what Lamech did. Mm-hmm. Lamech repaid evil for evil. And God said, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because in the same way I've forgiven you, I want you to forgive others. Is it hard? Yes. It's impossible, actually, without the Holy Spirit. Without God's assistance and God's help, it's impossible. So how do we forgive? The Greek word is let go. We let go. We cast away any seeking of vengeance. Now, how do we distinguish that from the feeling of pain, hurt, disappointment, anger, resentment, anything that might pop up. In those moments, because healing is not linear, it's not a straight line. It's a winding road of healing from pain, from disappointment, from hurt. And the question is, when we do the act of forgiveness, it's different from the emotion of forgiveness. Sometimes the emotion we have to walk through, allowing God to heal inside. And so those two things paired together is we are on a journey and a road of healing. But the first thing we have to do is the act. Different from the feeling, because forgiveness is not a feeling, it's an act. Now, are there emotions in it that we can let go of? Yes. But those generally take longer. And sometimes they pop up, like you said, at the most inopportune times.
Yeah.
At the worst times, they pop up. We get triggered. We remember something. We see somebody's face. We think about something. And we just, this almost like I've had those moments where my body just gets scalding hot. And I'm like, ah. And I have to take a moment and say, God, what would you do? What would you do in this moment? What do I do when I keep feeling anger and hurt? And I'm reminded of Colossians 3:13. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And I remind myself, have I not done the same things? Maybe not the same exact acts, but have I not done the same things? And God has been gracious to forgive me. And to whom much is given, much is required. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, God, you forgave me and I didn't deserve it. This person is undeserving. But in the same way that I want to reflect who you are in the world, I want to forgive this person so that heaven and earth can be aligned, so that I can rule the way you want me to in the earth. And here's the thing. Here's the last thing I'll say, and I want to hear your last thought. Don't wait for people to apologize.
Yeah.
Don't wait for people to apologize.
Yeah.
You may never get it.
Yeah.
You may never get it. Again, the life of God and the freedom of God comes when we choose. It's not a feeling. When we choose to say, I refuse, I let go of the idea, and I refuse to get vengeance and revenge on anybody. I'm not going to seek it. And any desire that pops up that the enemy tries to use to tempt me to do that, I'm going to go sit with the Lord until it's gone, until it subsides, until it goes away. And I choose every time to say, I've already forgiven this person because I'm not creating any plans. I'm not in some back room somewhere drawing up plans to hurt this person. I'm not doing it in my heart. I'm not doing it on paper. I have no desire to do that. And then the healing comes as the emotions slowly over time fade and fade more and more often.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, I really agree. I think the hardest part of forgiveness is accepting the fact that it's not typically instantaneous,
right?
Especially when the hurt runs deep. That's just part of it. You almost just have to surrender yourself to the fact that if you've been hurt really, really bad, it's probably going to be a process. And, I think about things in my own life, maybe, that I've been hurt deeply. And, like I said before, yeah, you say, I forgive him, and maybe you feel fine for a while, but something triggers it, and that pain comes back, and the anger comes back, and maybe even visions of giving that person their, comeuppance, that I'm going to give back to you what you gave me. I think that when you have those thoughts, you have to just stop yourself and say, look, I don't agree with these thoughts. I do not agree with these thoughts. These thoughts are truly not coming from God, and I don't want them. And it's just a matter of saying, I guess here's what I'm saying, is when you have those thoughts of revenge and vengeance, you don't have to take those thoughts. You don't have to say you agree with them. You can have those thoughts and say, no, I do not agree with that. Sometimes I've said things like, God, I don't agree with those thoughts. You don't agree with those thoughts. And I thank you that you're helping me with this.
That's good.
I don't agree with them, you don't agree with them, and I don't receive them. But I think that we have to understand and just say, hey, look, yeah, when the hurt runs deep, forgiveness is probably not going to come permanently overnight. But over time, we just say, no, I don't agree with that. I wish no ill will. I've even done things like in the past where you almost have to say it with your mouth.
You do, yeah.
In a
You have
room.
your own ears have to hear yourself say
Your own ears
it.
have to hear what the words coming out of your mouth. You might have to go somewhere in a room somewhere and say, I forgive. By God's grace, I forgive. And when the devil comes to put those thoughts of vengeance back in your mind, no, I don't agree with those thoughts. Those aren't my thoughts. I forgive. And that's a process of healing. That's at
good.
least the pathway there, because any sort of embracing hatred towards somebody is only bringing it's only magnifying your own pain. It's not going to bring healing.
It is. It's closing yourself off in a prison. And the hard part about that is not only affecting you, but those closest to you who love you in their own life. And so, okay, here's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is the letting go of the seeking of revenge and paying back. It is the letting go of that. The emotions are the healing process. The emotions are healed through this. It's not linear. It's around in circles sometimes, but that's the healing process. So we have to distinguish the act of forgiveness versus the emotions.
That's good.
And then here's what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. You don't have to be reconciled to somebody.
That's true.
Number two, you don't have to give your trust back to somebody. That is not required. Jesus never said, you got to be best friends with them again and give them all your trust.
Yeah.
No. He said, forgive.
Yeah.
So sometimes people teach it or talk about forgiveness in a way that makes it feel like I gotta be friends with this person.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. That's not a requirement. But it is a requirement that we forgive.
Yes.
That we relinquish and let go of the idea of seeking revenge, because Jesus did it with us. We should extend it to others, and this is a big part and a central part of how we rule.
Wow. Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that. We all need to hear that.
Yeah.
So again, it was a good time together.
For sure.
Appreciate it.
Yep.